Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the 7-Minute Takeover. I'm your co-host, Liz McRae, and this is
Eamonn Gamble.
And we're here with one of our Mythbusters today. So we are going to chat about the misconceptions of business brokers, and many of them get painted with the same brush. And I speak from experience, as I used to be a business broker, so I have a little bit of a soft spot for the good ones and the ones that really try and rise to the top. So why does this myth persist, Eamonn?
Well, it was very bold of you to admit that you were a sell-side broker before getting into this topic. So we'll see how the myth comes out at the end before making our decision about you. But the reason this myth exists is that to a lot of buyers, sell-side brokers seem like obstacles. You know, you've heard if you've negotiated with them, we won't take anything less than this. And you just want to have a conversation with the seller. You think you could get through to them. So they're often seen as people that are trying to obviously just get the best deal for their client, maybe by acting in ways that you would consider, unbecoming of a professional. These horror stories stick. You've heard them from other people buying businesses, and so eventually, most of the stories you hear about brokers are end up being negative. But I think the reality is, or we'll dive into it, is that a great broker can make all the difference in the world.
Yeah, and I do believe that. I think further to your point, a lot of them get painted with a negative lens because they're seen as gating content and keeping you at bay, and you have to get through the gatekeeper, and brokers don't respond to you, and they won't release all the information, and they're doing this to protect their client to a degree. Their job is to manage the process so that the business owner can continue to run their business with as little interruption as possible. And they bring a curated group of buyers to the table who they can then vet and filter through to get the best offer and the best terms for their client, and they're there to represent their client. That being said, one of the reasons there is an array of quality in the industry is because it's unregulated, and so anyone can call themselves a broker and hang up a shingle and sell businesses, and the training that is out there is varied as well. So I know there's some great efforts being made in the space to elevate brokers in that sector, but let's dig into what makes the good brokers, Eamonn. What can differentiate a good broker from one of the ones that may be less experienced?
Yeah, so some of you may not know, but I work very closely with our clients at Village to help put together offers and give them comfort around the deal structure that they're proposing. And when I see a few brokers' names pop up on a sim, I just say, thank you. Thank you for finding this deal. This is going to make my job a lot easier. The information is going to be presented consistently. The information is going to be reliable. Those brokers understand the common deal terms, and so they know if they ask for a certain thing, hey, lenders aren't going to like that, and maybe the overall price that they're able to get isn't strong. So there's a few brokers that, when they come to the table, we know that it's going to be an efficient transaction, and that I've got all the information I need to make, our clients, the buyers, and the lenders happy.
Yeah, absolutely. So top brokers should be preparing their client for what is to come as well. They should be preparing them in the process and what they should be expecting. They're guiding them in what common practices and terms mean, so that when a buyer pushes an offer across the table and it's got some nuanced deal structure to it, that the seller is guiding them in what's normal and what's to be expected and how to respond to various offers. And one of the things that I really like about good brokered deals is the data room that they prepare. So all the information should be prepared and should be sitting in a data room that's ready for due diligence and for a buyer's evaluation process. And so that's where it can be really time saving. And the best brokers are really being selective about which clients they take on. So you'll start to get familiar as a buyer, you'll start to get familiar with the quality of deals that certain brokers bring to market and that they will choose to represent, because they're saying no often to more clients than they are saying yes to.
Absolutely. And so, if a deal is really close to happening and there's just a buyer and a seller can't maybe figure out their way to come together, those really strong brokers, they're going to understand the needs of the seller better than anyone. And ideally they're getting to know you as a buyer and understanding your limitations and where you can really stretch and where your skill set is. Ultimately they want to make sure that the deal is going to close. And so if something needs to be put together to achieve everyone's goals, they're really in the best position to often make that happen.
Yeah, they will kind of nurture their client toward finding an arrangement that yes still works for them, but also works for the other party, and bring everyone together to meet in the middle. So it can be a big advantage when friction sets in. But here, Eamon, the last point we want to make in this episode is, what do we do if we suspect a deal is being represented by a weaker broker, and what that means for the transaction?
So we'll qualify a weaker broker being somebody who maybe has a little less experience. Sometimes you get real estate brokers representing companies, or just people that are new to the market that may not have the training. Or just people that are a little less organized than your average broker. So the problem is that the business of your dreams may be represented by what you call a weaker broker. So they may not be familiar with terms around seller financing or bank lending or valuations, for that matter. I'm sure we've all seen a deal that had some pretty aggressive valuation expectations. And so, there is a way to get to the finish line in this scenario. The benefit is that some people may have written this broker off already, and so may not be bidding on the opportunity. So, you may have a little bit less competition in bidding for the business, but it certainly means more work for you. Liz, what do buyers have to do when the information's not forthcoming and they need to do the homework themselves?
Yeah, that's where it comes down to knowing what questions to ask as a buyer, because information isn't being provided to you openly. So you've got to dig deeper. You've got to ask more questions. Sometimes, try and get those questions directly to the seller. If possible, lean on the seller's accountant to provide some of the information if needed. And, it may drive up some of your due diligence work and outside advisors in getting the answers that you need. Maybe it means a quality of earnings on the finances. Maybe it means more in-person meetings with the seller to walk through the space and really understand the operations. And it may mean defending your position more if the sell side broker is not coaching the client in all the elements that arise in the deal. And so you may need to push and educate the seller in how you're arriving at your evaluation of the deal, and really be able to defend it well as to why you're positioning your offer or your approach in this way, regardless of sometimes outside voices.
Right. So you may have higher due diligence costs. You may or may not get a better deal at the end of the day because of it, but it's definitely not a complete red flag as to whether you should pursue an opportunity or not. Just go in eyes wide open. There may be a higher risk that you find something in due diligence that just, it may be the end of the deal. So with that, let's wrap up, Liz.
Yeah, it's all part of the game. When you start looking for a business to buy, you're going to see good, bad, ugly. You're going to see it all. And so it's understanding how to weed through the information that is provided to you, and ultimately you'll get to a point where you're going to make a decision that's right for you. But I do believe there's lots of great brokers out there, and we've got a lot of them joining Village Wellth in our marketplace. So if you're looking for a business to buy, that's a great starting place for where you can meet them.
Awesome. So, lower your chances of dealing with that weak broker by being proactive and finding the good ones, and hopefully that'll provide the deal flow you need to get to the finish line. Awesome. Well, thanks for the discussion, Liz. I think it was really good to have your perspective on this coming from the sector, but I think that's our 7-minute takeover for today.
That's it, everybody. Until next time, take care.
Yeah, nice.